There we go. And put that there. Okay, so where did we stop? We stopped with alphabet. Talking about alphabets. Yes? Three kinds of writing system. Yes? There's the logogram or logographic, I should say. There's the syllabary or syllabic, and there is the alphabet. Okay, so we talked about logography and syllabary. Yes, Japanese and Cherokee. Now we're talking about the alphabet. Did I read this? I thought I read this. Yes. Okay, yes, thank you. We get to the alphabet. When first a picture, a logogram, actually starts to refer to more than just the thing, like a picture of let's say a picture of a fish, for example. A person would actually draw the image of a fish, and stuff like that. And, you'd say fish. Okay, you know what exactly what it was, the concept. It is what it is. But eventually, when someone, there was an advance, because people realized you could use that symbol, that picture, to represent maybe the first word of fish, an F. So whenever you wanted to write an F, you would write the character for a fish. And then you would have to figure out what you would want to represent the sh sound. Forget about vowels. People didn't think about vowels for some reason. They just thought about consonants and then had to add. So that was a great advance in the history of writing. And that's where you start getting into proto-alphabets, like early alphabets that are kind of alphabets, but they're more transitional between picture writing and alphabets, and true alphabets, which is a group of written symbols that represents one specific meaningful sound itself. So each sound that is uttered by the person has its own symbol. So b, k, d, f, g, h, j, k. All these separate sounds now have their own symbol, and that's what an alphabet is doing. The word is just a combination of the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha, which we would call A, and B, beta. So alphabet, that's all. There's no big mystery about that, what the word means. You will find out why we use the two Greek letters to describe an alphabet. You'll find that out in a moment. It'll make sense. And here's an example of what we call the Roman alphabet. Although the Romans didn't really invent this alphabet, they kind of stole it from the Greeks. Well, didn't steal it, but they took it from the Greeks, who took it from the Phoenicians. And you see, it represents every sound possible that we can have, for the most part, all right, including vowels. So vowels are in a different color, but all the consonants and stuff like that. And then other sounds that we use these letters to create other sounds that we don't necessarily have an alphabetical character for. So CH for ch, or sometimes k, all right? TH for the, or the, that sound. What else? SH for sh, stuff like that. ZH for zh. Other sounds that we can also make in English, but that we don't have separate letters for. Other alphabets do, but ours is not. All right? The alphabet, or at least the proto-alphabet, the origins of the alphabet date from the 19th century BC, around 1850 BC, before Christ, from a discovery, an archaeological discovery that was made in Egypt on the Sinai Peninsula. It's called the Sinai Peninsula, at a place that's called Serabit el Khadim. Serabit el Khadim, okay? This is the Sinai Peninsula. It's a peninsula because it's bounded by a body of water on three sides. It's a land that's bounded by water on three sides. So Florida is a peninsula. And it's a body of water. It's not just like a river. It's a body of water to make it a peninsula. And it's called the Sinai because people believe this is where Mount Sinai is, where God gave the Ten Commandments and His law to Moses and the Israelites. That traditionally somewhere down here in the south, there's a Christian monastery that's been there for a long, long time. So that's the traditional site. Other people think that it might be somewhere else, but whatever. I wasn't there, so if you were there, come tell me, because then you will teach this class. Not because you apparently do know more than I do. Anyways, so that's why it's called the Sinai Peninsula, and today it's part of the country of Egypt. So there is an archaeologist digging around, and he found some scratchings on the walls of, I guess, a mine, the cave of a mine, and also on some objects. Where am I here? My notes. Okay, about 30 crude inscriptions were found at this mountainous mining site. It was used to, mining, dig into the ground. They were looking for this mineral called turquoise, which I'll write it down for you, but it's just a pretty, kind of a bluish or greenish looking mineral. People thought it was pretty, and they could shine it up and make it look prettier. So it was valuable. It was a valuable mineral. So they had people mining in the mountains of southern Sinai looking for this. And these people were Semites. They were, you could say, Hebrews, ancient Jews, ancient Jews, if you want to call them that. They were certainly related to the modern Jewish people. They were Semites working in these mines. And it seems to be the world's oldest known alphabet that was discovered on these remains. Here's a picture of some of them. Okay, this is the guy W.M. Flinders Petrie. I believe he was the archaeologist who discovered them, and was able to say, are these just pictures, or is it really an alphabet? How do you distinguish? How do you know? Okay, it has to make some sense, So scholars have a way of figuring out whether what they're looking at is just simply picture making, or if there's these representations are meant to represent concepts in the human mind, information, which pictures aren't necessarily trying to tell you information. And they decided that they were letters, actually, that they were trying to represent information, because they were able to decipher them, because the scholar, or Petrie, thought that or maybe later scholars thought that some of these characters resembled characters in Egyptian hieroglyphics that they knew had meaning. Okay, were images, were pictures, yes. But they also had, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, some simpler pictures that would be used to represent characters as well. It's almost like an alphabet, but not really. Like if you needed to spell foreign words in Egyptian, well, there was no picture for it, but you still needed to spell it. So they came up with other symbols to do that. And these seem to be related to those symbols, but now they're being used to spell actual words out. And so the archaeologists were able to decipher what some of these characters meant. Okay. So here's a picture of it, just so you know. This type of writing, this alphabet, spreads out of, it seems to come originally from Egyptian hieroglyphics. So it spreads out of Egypt, and it goes upwards north to another group of Semites, another group of, well, I won't say they're Jews, they're a different branch of the Semitic group, called the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, who lived on the western coast of what is modern-day northern Israel, I think southern Lebanon. Okay, see here on this map, this reddish area, this is northern Israel, actually most of Lebanon, the country of Lebanon here, this tiny country, and also Syria, I should say. Part of this is the country Syria, the western part of the country Syria. So there were these Phoenicians, here's the word right there, and this was the area where they lived was called Phoenicia. Okay, so it makes sense, the land of the Phoenicians. And from this map, you can see that they were they spread across the Mediterranean because they were traders. That was their main claim to fame. They got on ships and boats, and they took stuff all around the Mediterranean to do business, to trade things. Okay, that's what they were known for. But with them, they took this alphabet that they inherited from other Semites that they found, evidence of which they found in Servet el-Qadim, and somehow migrated up to the Phoenicians. They took over and modified this proto-alphabet from Servet el-Qadim, kind of an alphabet, this transitional kind, and they made it a true alphabet. They made it true characters symbolic of sounds in the Phoenician language. And they said it spread with them. These are like their trading routes, a map of their trading routes. You can see their influence all the way to the farthest reaches of the Mediterranean, to the Atlantic, the coast of Spain. Also, you see here with this little arrow that Brittany and Cornwall. Brittany's up here in France. Cornwall is here in England. So they even, I guess, made it all the way up there sometimes. But yeah, all throughout it in northern Africa, Sardinia, parts of Italy. Apparently, I guess they didn't have much colonization. These purple areas, I think, represent cities and colonies where they actually colonized the area. These other places, like in Italy and Greece, they had city-states that they had relationships with, but there were no Phoenician colonies there per se. So their alphabet, this Semitic alphabet writing system, spread with the Phoenician traders to the rest of the Mediterranean world. They brought it with them, and dated to around 1050 BC. So it starts to be spread, and it gets spread especially to the Greeks in Greece. Okay, this is their alphabet. This is the alphabet they developed. All consonants, by the way. In the earliest alphabets, they for some reason just didn't consider vowels. I don't know why. It never occurred to someone to say, e. Shouldn't we have symbols for that as well? No, just consonants. It's enough. You can tell from the context what I mean. But you can't always with just consonants. I mean, if I write this, consonants, do I mean word, or I should say that, do I mean wood? Like O-O-D? Do I mean wide? What do I mean? You have to tell from the context of what I'm talking about. All right, it's the same way with Phoenician or this early Semitic alphabet. So here you can see the letters and how they would be transliterated into our modern Roman alphabet. In some cases, you can maybe see that they're you can see the derivation, like the letter D or H on its side, or kind of like an H, not H on its side, but H. You can maybe see how this became a W. How that became a K, stuff like that. The comma, the two commas, not commas, excuse me, the two single quotation marks represent gutturals. They're not vowels. They're said in the back of the throat. They're so they're consonants because they constrict the larynx. So they're considered consonants. They're not vowels. Y is not really a vowel. It's a Y, which is it's not used as a vowel in ancient Phoenician, etc. and so forth. You have other, like sh, this represents sh, the sound sh. This represents ts, ts sound. This represents h, like in German or some other languages. The h sound. Anywho, so this was their alphabet. Around 8, it spread to Greece, and we can thank the Greeks for turning it into a true alphabet, the true alphabet that we know today, because the Greeks took this around 800 BC, and they added vowels. They imported it, and they transformed it to represent their own sounds. You actually had to even add a few that the Phoenician didn't have. And this is the revolutionary change. Someone thought, hey, vowels, what about vowels? Vowels are left out. They need a symbol too. And so they took some of the letters from Phoenician and made them into vowels. So like the guttural, they used for alpha. All right. The other guttural, O, so that's omega. Actually, it's not omega, it's omicron, short O. They use this one for E, for E. Okay. And so this is their alphabet, but they, some of them they did not use. Some of them were tossed out, like these two. They didn't come over. Q didn't survive into Greek. And some of the ones that Greek had, Phoenician did not have. So phi, a foot sound. They used the chi for the ch sound instead of using this. Psi, PS, the PS sound is its own letter. It's not two sounds, as we might think in English. Is one sound in Greek. And then omega, the long O, which was not part of the Phoenician alphabet. Well, obviously they didn't have vowels at all, but they had a long O that they needed to take into account. So I guess they could have used one of these two symbols, but they didn't. They just added it. Okay, so now you have a true alphabet. Consonants and vowels developed by the Greeks. From a Semitic source, the Phoenicians. I'm not going to talk about that. The Greeks then passed that on to the Italians. Okay, the Romans eventually, through their contacts with Greece, take over this idea of the Greek alphabet, and they also tweak it and change it to represent their language, which is Latin, which is a very different language. It's a related language to Greek, same language family, but different in many ways. And so they also change it, or they change it. So you can see here, obviously, some of the letters are exactly the same, alpha and beta, alphabet, okay? But gamma, which would be G in our alphabet, is not the same. Delta is not exactly the same. Epsilon, short E, is the same. Y is the same, or upsilon. Zeta is the same. This is a vowel, this is not H, it's eta, long E. So they didn't have an H. They had to get an H into Latin, etc. and so forth. So some of them look exactly the same and were taken over by the Romans exactly as they were. Others were changed by the Romans to their own form. We see now here like three, I'm just going to do this very quickly just so I can say I said it, but there are three types of alphabet we can identify. This is not on the PowerPoint. I'm going to write it on the board. So I put it on the PowerPoint. I'll talk about it forever. Anyways, because it fascinates me. I just find this stuff interesting. But there are three types. There's an Abugida alphabet. Scholars identify three types. Abugida alphabet, an Abjad alphabet, and then a true alphabet. They're all really three types of the same. They're all types of the same kind of thing, same idea, I should say. An alphabet proper. What's an Abugida? An Abugida is kind of like a bridge between picture writing and the alphabet proper. Okay, sometimes it's even called. Well, I shouldn't say picture writing. It's more correct to say syllabic writing, the syllabary. So let me correct myself on that before I go too far. It's kind of a transition, or has a connection to the syllabary. I should say it's like an alphabetic kind of syllabary. On a syllabary, they have one symbol to represent, two sounds together, ba, be, bi, bo, boo. Okay, and each of those syllables has its own sound, or has its own symbol in a syllabary. And Abugida is kind of like that, in which as an alphabet, it's still an alphabet. Each consonant is modified by a vowel. But the vowel is not necessarily necessary. Okay, you don't necessarily have to write the vowel with it. So it's kind of like an alphabet in the sense that you have a symbol for a sound, but you don't always have to represent the vowel part of the sound or vowel part of the symbol. Okay, you see this, for example, in hold on a second. There we go. Hindi. And this is the word, Wikipedia. There we go. This is actually the word in the writing system. It's an Indian writing system from India called Hindi. This is actually the spelling of the word Hindi in Hindi. And you'll see that, it goes from left to right, that, there are two vowels in it, a short I sound, I, and then a long, an E, okay? And they're written, you can write them above the consonant sounds of Hind, H-N-D, okay? But you don't have to, all right? So you have a kind of like a syllable, hi, all right? And this would be the letter, I guess you could say, because it's kind of like an alphabet for the H sound. And then, depending on what kind of, I don't speak Hindi, you're right, Hindi, okay? So I'm not an expert, so just, cut me some slack, all right? Anyways, but for the H sound, and then you can write this symbol, which would be for the short I, okay? Or you could write another symbol, you would still have the H sound, same for the most part, and attach another symbol to it for another vowel and stuff like that. But not necessarily. That's what's called an abugida, all right? It's kind of like a syllabary, but it's kind of like an alphabet as well. It's in between, all right? It's a halfway house, you might say. Okay. Thai, in Thailand, the language Thai would be another language or a writing system that is called an abugida. It does the same thing. Thai is one of the most complicated writing systems on the planet because they try to do everything with each letter. Give you the vowel, give you the tone, because it's a tonal language. Your pitch goes up, down, or sideways depending on what the word is. Also, it wants to transliterate words that come from Sanskrit, a totally different language, but the emperor who made up helped make the alphabet I think he was a Buddhist, and a lot of the Buddhist writings were in Sanskrit, so we wanted to, make those terms available in Thai. Anyways, it's very complicated, but it's also an abugida in that way. Then we have an abjad, and that's where the Phoenician alphabet comes in, and those derived from it. So, Phoenician has died out. But modern equivalents of an abjad would be Hebrew and Arabic, all right, Semitic languages. Hebrew has no vowels. I mean, they kind of do. They have a pointing system that they'll teach little children for the first few years in school until they get used to the context, and then they'll take them away and just use the consonants. It's an abjad. So it just has consonants. No vowels are represented in the language or in this alphabet, okay? A proper alphabet does have written symbols for all complete individual sounds, like a consonant and a vowel, and that starts with Greek, right? Ancient Greek. So, abugida, an example of abugida is Hindi from India or Thai from Asia. Well, they're both from Asia. Abjad, which is Hebrew, which is also in Asia. And then alphabet from the Greeks, true alphabet from the Greeks who are in Europe. What do they need? Are you my kitty friend? There you are. The history of writing. According to our reading from Kolmas, there are 3 things that can be said about the history of writing. First, it comes from pictures. Human beings were picture makers before they were writers. In fact, human beings were doing pictures tens of thousands of years before any writing appears. Okay? It's rooted in pictures. It originated several times. There is not one single origin for human writing. It actually appears independently in different places on the planet. So it's appeared several times in different places, okay? At different time periods throughout human history and in different places on our planet. But there are some questions. How did it come into existence, Ms. Wenrich? Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it be because people needed a way to communicate?
Yes, they did. Excellent. That's a good answer. I was actually being rhetorical.
Well,
No, that's fine. That's excellent. That's an excellent answer. Yeah. Well, how did it come into? What do you? Where do you? Why do you think people would need to use it? What do you think they would need to communicate?
danger, other people,
Danger
other
to other people, or communicate other people.
that they're around. There's like, oh, there's outsiders in here,
Okay.
so very like
Interesting.
be in their own area.
That take a long time though. I mean, if the people are like there coming at you with their spears and their knives,
Well, if they
would
see
you
us,
stop to like carve something?
no, or like animals, like where the food is.
Oh, okay. A message like, "Hey, there are a lot of buffalo in this area. Go
Yeah.
well." Interesting. Yeah, that's an important message. What other things? We have think of basic. That's a basic activity. You need to know where to hunt. So, yes, Mr. O'Neill. History. Interesting. Do you think that's what people were doing originally with writing? Do you think that was their primary purpose? Like, I need to write down a family history or something? Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you want maybe political records, you want to tell the story of the king and his conquests and the buildings he built and stuff like that. You want to read that. That's important. So that's history. Okay, good. What other reasons? What other reasons might you think writing would have developed, or come into existence? Mr. Kazin, do you have an opinion?
I think they just made it, like that's how it's in existence, like humans made it. I don't have any
For no purpose?
no to like be able to like talk and like have conversations.
But they could talk. They knew each other.
Yeah, but like make it like
Hey Max, what's going on?
make like an actual thing that everyone can agree on.
Okay. Interesting.
So like I'm sure like they had a bunch of different languages. I mean
I would think so.
like around like from town to town.
Okay. Interesting, yes. For communication purposes. This Jacoby? Jacoby, sorry. Jacoby.
I just feel like it's in like all in nature. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like we're not like lonely animals. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not like we are like supposed to be like with each other.
Okay. Have you seen these humans? How they get together and get along? Okay, so what does that mean for writing, though? Because if people are together, I can say the same thing that they said to Mr. Keys. They can just talk, right? They can just talk if they're together.
Somebody's traveling.
Okay, well, I got you, sir. I got you. How would writing facilitate or be part of travel?
Like, if you like want to talk to somebody that's not here, so you can't like tell them.
Okay, it's like you don't know their language, you can draw for them what you want. Like if you want something to eat, or where's the bathroom, that's a big one. You can draw something for them. Okay, interesting. It's still kind of in the realm of pictures. I got you, Mr. O'Neill. What did you want to say?
I just think like,
Yes, Mr. Clange. Pick it up. It might be Jesus. Just coming back, Mr. Clange. You got 5 minutes.
but I was just saying like, I don't know if it's a good thing like people can't communicate through words, can't understand.
Like a mute person or something?
Yes, you can do that. I don't know if how the population is stuff that if they're deaf, but yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't
Yeah.
know if they really care about that.
No, I'm sure. I would imagine in cultures that people for some reason can speak and they show us, write down for us what they're trying to tell us or what you want. This, don't tell me. Is that not what I say? Bolton? No, don't tell me. Oh, Ms. McDonald?
Donnelly.
Huh?
Donnelly.
Donnelly. Oh, Mackenzie, right? That's what I'm getting. Mackenzie.
I just think it's a more tangible like, communication. I mean, there were no like recording devices back then or anything, so I feel like at a point, if you're having serious discussions, like someone said, recording just history, I just feel like it was kind of part of it. Maybe you should think of something that we can have tangible and that it can kind of exists longer than what's like in the air when spoken.
Yeah, so you want to remember,
Yeah.
really remember.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't know, such a moment way to put something right in this probably it's tangible.
But this is the interesting thing. It wasn't the only. There was no way. There was no way. No one had thought of it.
No, I understand that, but I feel as though as we progressed from writing into like I don't say obviously there's a big gap, but like to type computers and stuff. I feel like as far as you can comprehend, like writing would be first. Like that's like the first recording device. So like film's not thinking or digital. It's just it all had to start somewhere.
But why didn't it just stay with pictures then? Because pictures is a recording device too. I mean, like your statement about you want to write like here's where the food is or warn people about that. Why can't you just draw a picture of a scary dude or a scary woman or something and everyone knows, okay, that's the picture, meaning there's danger. But it's not writing, it's just a picture. Why was writing involved?
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay, go ahead.
You
Is it okay? Yeah.
I feel like maybe writing's more expensive, it's more detailed, and it's not to interpretation as much.
Oh, that's interesting. I love interpretation. It's very interesting. Yeah, Ms. Renner.
It's definite. You have specific words for specific things. You don't have to assume and make assumptions about it. Okay, it could be a scary person, but if you see a picture, the scary person might not be scary. It might just be a person that they draw differently than other people. So you may see it as a scary person, but I may see it as like a brother and father.
Well, I agree with you. Yeah. Sometimes when you watch those shows about ancient alien theorists, you watch those shows about Discovery Channel. Ever see those shows? They go back into archaeology and they show pictures of Discovery Channel and say, oh, look at this picture on it's painted on a wall or a cave in Africa. Doesn't it look like a guy in a spacesuit? It's like, yeah, I guess it could look like a guy in a spacesuit, but it's a picture. Is that what this African tribe was trying to depict, that they actually encountered someone in a spacesuit? I got you, Mr. O'Neill.
Just to add on to that, kind of like, I guess, pictures are more like very abstract, so kind of just explaining, like you need multiple things, and you want people to consistently understand you, something that is repetitive.
Wants to be repetitive. Good. And
I think pictures can be influenced into seeing different things. Like you can see somebody can see a dog and then really know it's a wolf. And then a lot more people think it's a wolf. But it's dog. If it's like specifically stated, you can't really change and influence people into
yeah, if it says it's a dog, then that's what it says. Even if the person did draw a picture of a wolf and write dog underneath it. But the words, so the picture could still be, you'd have to talk to the artist then. What did you intend? No, I drew a wolf, but I wanted to mess with people. So I wrote dog. Because I just kind of the way I roll, guess in people's minds. Anyways, yeah, that's good. What activities do you think would necessitate writing? What would be so important that you would have to write something down? Because really, for most human cultures, even after writing appears, writing did not appear and then blossom. Okay, orality, speaking to people. I gotta stop speaking because I say it, don't spray it after that. Anyways, speaking to people was the primary means of communication, not writing, and it was actually seen as more permanent than writing. Okay, you'd have something really important to say to another person, like you were the ruler or king or something, and you had to communicate with another king somewhere else. You had messengers, and you would tell them, and they would memorize and remember what you told them. And they would run away and go to the other person and then tell them the message and then receive the response and come back and tell you. From memory. They didn't write stuff. Now, even when writing was known and people could write, they still didn't write stuff. It was seen as a lesser art form or technology, you might say. Because you should be able to remember. The fact that you had to write it down meant you couldn't remember it. It wasn't important. Also, the fact that you wrote it down means you couldn't ask the person what the message meant. You just had the words. You didn't have the person there to say, okay, when you wrote dog under this picture of something that looks like a wolf, why did you write that? You can't interrogate a writing. It won't answer back, but a person can. What would be important enough for people to write stuff down? Okay, well, I'll tell you. But anyways, I thought we'd have that discussion. Just get you thinking, get the juices flowing, because that's one of the questions that Kolmas raises. How did it come into existence? Why would it even, wrong mouse. Why would it even come into existence? Another question he asks is, how did it develop? Okay, how did writing develop? Which I guess is kind of an easier question to answer. But then how did it spread, which is also kind of an easier question to answer. Let's start with the first one. How did writing come into existence? Drawing. Okay? As I told you, when I defined what writing is, the word ritan in Old English, and also I talked about Proto-Indo-European, the basis of the word for writing in Indo-European, has the sense of carving, but also drawing and painting, which has remained in the language, even though words have been transformed and come to mean writing now. So hieroglyphs, glypho, remember in Greek, really means to paint something. And in some languages, I shouldn't say languages, but some writing systems, this is still the norm for even how you write. For example, in Chinese, Japanese, I don't know if they do this in Korean, but I know Chinese and Japanese, you don't write with a pen typically. You write with a brush. That's the traditional and the proper way to write the Chinese and Japanese alphabets. Well, excuse me, alphabets. Writing systems, I should say. With a brush, not with a pen. So it's rooted in drawing. What is drawing? It's the act by which one produces an image or likeness of something by means of making lines on the surface of something. Okay, you place lines, geometric shapes, basically, on something else. Your canvas, you might say. All right, and it's as a likeness. It's meant to be the likeness of something else, either exactly the likeness or as close as you can get, or it could be more abstract or whatever. But it's still supposed to be like something. And you're making lines because that's the basic geometry of anything. Your lines, points which add up to a line. I mean, what else? That's what you're doing when you're drawing, okay? You're drawing lines, or making lines. And it comes from the Old English word dragon, which means to drag or pull, Just kind of like what you're doing with your implement when you are drawing. You're dragging it across the paper or the canvas or the wall of something. Humans have been drawing pictures for thousands and thousands of years, much longer than writing, and that's how humans, all our evidence is that that's how humans first expressed themselves, that is through pictures. The earliest datable pictures that we have, there might be earlier ones, but the earliest ones that archaeologists have found come from around 51,000 years ago, and were discovered in Indonesia. Where is Indonesia? I didn't put a map on here, but I like to show people where in the world I'm talking about. No, I don't want to do that. Remind me later. Let's see here. It's a Google search. Google search maps. Here we are. How does Google know where we are? Isn't that weird? Mr. Kettner knows where we are. World order. Yes, okay, so here's our country. We go across the Atlantic. Actually, I'm going the wrong way. Well, either. We're on a globe, right, Mr. Claims? Either way is fine, right? I'll get to where I'm going. We go to across the Pacific Ocean, and you'll see this bunch of countries here. This top one is Malaysia, and these land masses, these islands, are part of the country of Indonesia. I always kind of remember the difference between the two by thinking Indonesia is underneath you. You know, it's underneath Malaysia, right? Because I kind of confuse these two countries, but Indonesia is underneath. So it's Indonesia here. So I think it was on this island here in the center of the country that they discovered writing, or pictures, I should say, excuse me, the first human, or the earliest human pictures that we know of. On this cave wall, that's the original cave wall at the top, and at the bottom is a reproduction, so you can kind of see the images. Images of pigs, a couple images of pigs, what seems to be a picture of maybe a human figure, a Noah. I think a Noah is an animal native to that region. I might have looked it up. You can see another picture of a Noah on the right-hand side. So these are pictures, okay? And the earliest pictures that we know of, 51,000 years ago. And so the pictures serve as an expression, a visual expression to our eyes, our vision, our seeing, our sense of sight of a person's ideas. This is an idea of a pig, okay? This isn't an actual pig, all right, or an actual human being, but you're drawing it kind of like what a pig looks like when you see it, so you can kind of tell what it is. You can enter into the mind of the person. So it's a visual expression of the person's ideas, but these are largely independent of speech, because they don't tell you anything. They don't express something for your hearing, like telling people with speech and words. So most, if not all, scripts that we have, writing systems, trace back directly or indirectly to some form of picture writing in some way, drawing pictures. Here's another example. This is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, evidences for human writing. Actually, I think it's called proto-writing. It's on the cusp of being writing. But it's symbols, a symbol of a hand, what looks to be a hand, seems to be a foot, okay, maybe another foot here, and other symbols that some geometric symbols, but other symbols that I don't know what they might represent. But they seem to be put together in a way that they are trying to communicate information. So hence, scholars call it proto-writing. And did I write down, I forget if I wrote down my, here in my notes what it is. No, I guess I didn't. Well, anyway, I think it's Sumerian.
from the 3000s BC. But people are using pictures here to then starting to communicate concepts. Whoops. And that's when you have this revolution. Oh, a second. I'm not saying anything more about that. Or am I going to come to that? Give me 1 second here. I just want to check my notes to remind myself. If I'm going to... Because I don't know if I mentioned what I'm thinking in my mind. Okay. When I was asking you, like, why would writing start, there were two main reasons that scholars think, archaeologists think, that writing developed. There was a need for writing. Because there were two basic needs of humans. One was an economic need, and the other was a religious need. So economics, business, and religion are the two things that come together and seem to bring about the need for writing stuff down in order to remember things. Economics and religion. Business and God. These were the two most important things to people. Because you needed economics, you needed this to live, to eat, to drink, a lot in farming cultures and also herding cultures. You needed to know how many animals you had. If you're in a farming culture and you're selling your grain or whatever, you need to know how many bushels of grain you sold. And it wasn't good enough to commit that to memory because, people can forget. People can lie, say, I gave you 3 bushels, you paid me for 2. No, I paid you for all 3. Well, there's no record of it. You just have the word of the person. Okay? In the case of religion, like, you want to know what to do after death when you die, especially with, like, the Egyptians. A lot of their texts are centered around religion and death. What do you do with the person who has died, and how do they get to the good place? They can call it heaven, but, the good place in the afterlife and not the bad place. So that was important to people. Okay, so they wanted it, but they couldn't rely just on people telling you. They wanted it written down so they could know, because there were certain codes and prayers and rituals that you had to do, and there were so many, people couldn't remember them. But they needed to remember them if they wanted to get to the good place and not go to the bad place. So they had to start writing them down. It was a necessity. It was important to them. So 2 things: staying alive, economics, keeping alive, and being alive after death, having a good afterlife. So religion. So interesting, economics and religion. And so what people, writing seemed to develop from this process where, let's say I'm a farmer or I'm a herdsman and I sell someone 10 sheep, okay? You want to draw up some kind of contract. You want to write that out. You want to have a record of it now. And it can't be, and maybe it started out as a picture type thing where you would draw an image of 10 sheep, and just literally draw pictures of 10 sheep on a piece of clay, all right? And then you would have that piece of clay and the other person, you sold it like a contract, or that'd be proof. Maybe you put your some symbol for your name of your family, all right? People used to do this in the past, be the signet ring, right? When people used to write letters and stuff like that in the Middle Ages, they put, burn some, melt some wax on it, and they'd have a ring with a symbol of their family's crest, and they push it into the wax. So that would prove that it came from him or her or whoever. Same kind of thing. Eventually, what if you sell the guy 1,000 sheep? Or something, are you going to have to draw 1,000 little pictures on the clay of each sheep? No, and again, necessity is the mother of invention, man. You're going to find, okay, I can just draw one picture of a sheep, and then I can make up a character, a symbol that represents 1,000. The idea, the concept of 1,000. Now you have writing or proto-writing. You're still using a picture for sheep, and it means a sheep. But now you have a thing to represent the concept of 1,000, the number 1,000. You might even come up with another symbol to indicate the plural for the symbol of sheep, to show that it's not just one sheep, because someone might be confused. They might say, I know that's a symbol for 1,000, and that's a symbol for sheep. What is he talking? 1,000 what? One sheep and 1,000 other things? You know, no, it's plural, 1,000 sheeps. Although that's not the plural in English, okay? That's bad English. But you get my meaning, right? You get what I'm talking about. That's what they think may have happened with writing. The need for writing was based out of that necessity, okay? Keeping some sort of proof of the things you were doing, if you sold things to other people, to keep track of how many animals you had, because if people were stealing your animals, you don't eat. You know, you don't have the milk, from the goat. You don't have the flesh from the sheep, or the wool from the sheep. And people are, so you want to know, how many things do I have? People wanted to know this, my stuff. People also wanted to know if there's the afterlife, or even in this life, how do I please the gods so they give me health, but they don't hurt me? Well, there are all these rituals to do. Well, I can't remember all these rituals, so you have to write them down, find some way to communicate these rituals. And drawing pictures wasn't enough. Couldn't draw a picture of 1,000 sheep all the time. Okay. So that seems to be where writing came from. Where did writing develop? Well, in 4 places, at 4 different time periods. In Mesopotamia, in Egypt, in China, and then in Mesoamerica, the New World. Oops, I don't want to stay. There we go. In Mesopotamia, writing emerged around 3,500, between 3,500 BC and 3,100 BC. Then it emerged in Egypt around 3,250 BC. So a little bit after that, a couple hundred years after. Much later in China, it developed around the 1200s BC, and much later in Mesoamerica and the New World, Middle America, sometime around, they think, before 500 BC, but we can't be sure. Originally, scholars assumed that writing had a single origin. This from, say, the 1800s, when you start getting modern science and scientific method, like, and get language study, linguistics, and archaeology, and anthropology. A lot of the earliest thinkers on that from the 1800s going up until around the 1950s believed that writing had a single origin. It just started in one place amongst one group of people. And the reason for that was really not based on evidence per se. It was based on prejudice, really based on the Bible. Because a lot of these people, even if they weren't believers in like Judaism or Christianity, they knew the Bible, and they kind of still had maybe you call it even superstitious belief in it, even if they weren't believers or practicers anymore. And so the Bible, says that, there's one pair of human beings. Obviously, you would assume that Adam and Eve spoke the same language, probably Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, which of course would make no sense because, well, once they started finding examples of earlier forms of Hebrew, they knew that would make no sense, that biblical Hebrew came later. But, they had the Bible story that humanity came from one pair of people, and they probably spoke the same language. And then from that one pair of people, language spread out through the planet. The assumption going along with that was that writing also developed amongst this group of people. So they had what was called a monogenetic theory of the origin of writing. Monos meaning one or single, genetic, gene meaning origin, where something comes from. So monogenetic theory. And usually, this they kind of got right. They associated this original group that created, or where these writings came from, with the Sumerians. This ancient empire, if you want to call it an empire, that was in the country of Iraq, modern country of Iraq, called Sumer. and that it originated with them. That was the original idea. They weren't far off on that. They were in the right location for the origins of writing. But by the 1950s and after, with all the evidence, archaeological evidence and stuff that had been discovered, they just knew that this monogenetic theory was not correct. The evidence was showing that there was an independent development of scripts in different parts of the world, different parts of Asia, even in the New World and the Americas, that seemed to have developed at different times. So monogeneticism was not a viable theory anymore, as Florian Kolmos tells you in your reading. And he says, quote, everything in present knowledge points to the fact that writing was engendered independently by several relatively advanced sedentary civilizations. Sedentary meaning they weren't nomadic, they didn't move around, they had cities and towns and stuff, probably farmers and stuff like that, settled civilizations characterized by urbanization, cities, division of labor. So they had kind of like a caste system. They have rulers and then the people underneath them, the farmers and artisans and workers, the warriors. So they had a division of labor and a surplus economy. So they were doing things like farming and herding animals and whatever. The general consensus is still that writing developed originally in the ancient Near East, what we would call the Middle East today, and that it originated independently in most cases. As we'll see in the case of Mesopotamia and Egypt, there is some question about whether Mesopotamia influenced Egypt, actually. And these are the four independent regions where scholars say that writing, that recognize that writing developed. The first and the earliest is Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia are two Greek words. Meso means middle. Potamia comes from the Greek word for river. So it's between the two rivers, between the rivers. There are two rivers called the Tigris and Euphrates, which flow down through from the mountains to the north through Iraq and into the I think it's the Gulf of Aden, if I remember correctly, or it's the Persian Gulf. This is the Red Sea. This is the Gulf of Aden, I think. This is the Persian Gulf. I don't know. Yeah, Persian Gulf. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because there's Persian iron in it. So, anyways, and that's where it developed in Mesopotamia. It developed amongst the Sumerians. Sumer, the ancient empire, not very big for an empire, but Sumer, which was in southern Iraq. Interestingly, Sumer was right on the ocean there, but you'll notice that the Persian Gulf is not there anymore because the waters have receded. So this is the original boundary of the Persian Gulf. It was all the way up here, but the waters have receded for some reason. So looks like Sumer was far away from the ocean, but it wasn't. And the Sumerians developed a form of writing which is based on pictures called cuneiform or cuneiform. So that's a cuneiform. I say cuneiform. Which is a kind of writing that uses wedge-shaped characters. Cuneus in Latin means a wedge, and that's exactly what they did. They had, a piece of wood as their instrument that was, the end of it was shaped in the shape of a little wedge, like a triangle. You would press it into wet clay to make the pictures that represented the words, the concepts that you wanted to communicate. And there's a picture, an example of cuneiform. I showed it to you earlier, but here it is again. These little wedge shapes that go up and down, mostly, sometimes to the side, diagonally. And this form, Mesopotamian cuneiform, is well documented by a wealth of clay tablets. They had a lot of clay in the region, so that was the medium they used for writing. And it was primarily used, again, for economics, for accounting, keeping track of things, money, contracts of sale, when you sold animals or stuff to other people. And also the administration of the temple economy, the temples of the gods. Okay, you wanted to keep an account of that because people would keep money in the temples and they would keep stuff in the temples too. So you want to keep an inventory. And they were, crude pictures that were pressed into wet clay. But then they were given a linguistic value or interpretation, and that's when it becomes writing. Okay, so pictures are the root of Sumerian writing, but eventually these pictures develop a life of their own, and they become actual symbols of concepts. Next, we have Egypt. Is our next evidence. There are some people, and there's some people who try and say that Egypt actually might have come first, especially Egyptologists, those who study archaeologists who study Egypt. Sumeriologists, I think is what they're called, who specialize in Sumer, of course, they know Sumer. So the question is still open among some scholars about who actually did come first and who was influenced by whom. But I'm just going with the standard view, which is that later on, Egypt in the 3200s BC develops what are called hieroglyphics, picture writing that was used by the religious leadership of Egypt. And that's exactly what it means. Here also means sacred or holy, dedicated to the gods. And glyph means, see here, glyph, I define what a glyph is, any kind of symbol or character that's been carved or cut into an object. And that's what they did. They carved these pictures into stone. Originally, eventually they would write them down in ink and stuff like that. But originally, most of the stuff we have from Egyptian is the carvings and the cuttings and the stone monuments that the Egyptians built in hieroglyphics, in glyphs. So glypho means to carve in Greek. It can also mean to paint, if I remember correctly, in its derivation. So a glyph is any symbol carved into an object. These were sacred things carved, so they are hieroglyphics. So it's religious. It's embedded in the very name of their writing system. This was, not only did these symbols come directly from the gods, but the symbols represented the things that they pictured. Okay, so they were literally divine because they were made up by the gods themselves and given to human beings, and they were also. It wasn't just for the Egyptians. It wasn't just a representation of a concept. It was the concept itself. It wasn't just a picture of a bird, a representation of the concept bird. It was the bird. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but that's why Egyptian hieroglyphics became extremely complicated. They started making thousands and thousands of different ones to represent every possible concept. Everyone had to have one to represent its nature. It became very complicated. But you can kind of see how it works. These symbols are strung together, and you're kind of reading the symbols rather than reading letters. Because remember, it's a picture type of thing, logography. So these different symbols, you kind of read them together, okay, and they translate to certain things. And you can see the translation at the bottom. It's an inscription that I found in a book. It's not really an important inscription. I just wanted to give you an example of a translation of what hieroglyphics might mean. So the meaning or the origin of writing was not lost in Egypt, even though it comes to be a form of writing. Its meaning is pictorial signs, even though it changes. Now, where it came from in Egypt is a mystery because it just appears. We don't see any development. It just suddenly appears. And there seem to be good evidences that they were influenced by the Sumerians, even though their writing system looks very different. From the Sumerian cuneiform. But, the Egyptians seem to be imitating a lot of Sumerian culture, and it makes more sense that they were being influenced by Sumeria rather than Sumeria, because Sumer doesn't show any influence from Egyptian culture at all. So why would they take writing from Egypt, but no other cultural aspect from Egypt? Whereas Egypt has influences from Sumer all over the place, including a writing system. So the evidence seems to lean towards the fact that Egyptian hieroglyphs came later and were influenced by the Sumerian idea. But there's passionate disagreement between Egyptologists and Sumerologists, is what it is, Sumerologists, about which area had the first writing. But I think that Sumerologists are probably correct that Sumer influenced Egypt. Of course, from Egypt, we did get the alphabet, so they can at least say, yeah, yay, Egypt for that. China develops later, and our first evidence of writing in China is from oracle bones. Other than that, we don't really know where it came from, but they did find oracle bones, which were, again, religious. These were used to divine, to figure out what the gods wanted someone to do. You know, should I take that next job or something? So I'll go to the shaman, the local holy person, and, you know, he or she will throw bones on the ground and then interpret how they land to tell me, well, the gods or the spirits say, yes, you should take the job. Oracle bones, okay? The knowledge of the gods or hidden knowledge is revealed. Comes from the Latin word oraculum, which means an announcement from a god. You get a message from a god through these objects. Also prophecy. Again, ancient Chinese was pictographic. It was basically pictures of things, okay? Sometimes clear, sometimes not so clear, okay? I can't show you what these are pictures of, but you see it's kind of crude in comparison to modern Chinese writing. But they're more picturesque but still Chinese writing retains that idea of pictures. You know, it's based on pictures. Okay? It's a figurative representation of things and ideas. And kind of like Egyptian hieroglyphics, that's why it makes Chinese so complicated as a writing system. Because we have to learn about 2,000 to 3,000 characters to get by. Like to read a newspaper. That's how people define getting by. If you're educated, probably more like 6,000 to 8,000 characters. But there are tens of thousands of Chinese characters because you have to represent all these different concepts just like hieroglyphics. And so they're pictures. So you have to make up a new picture. And then they add pictures to the pictures because some of the pictures, you know, it's the same word, but it's pronounced in a different tone, so it has a different idea. So you have the concept, the idea, and then they write the picture of what the word should be pronounced as. So you know, okay, it's ma, but this picture tells me that it's supposed to mean mother and not horse. So it's ma, not ma. Okay, so it's very complicated with picture writing. Thank God for the alphabet. All right. See, this is a thing I took from a book just to show this, just to give you an example. Mesopotamia, cuneiform, all picture writing. All right, Egypt and China, and you can see how the images develop. You know, a fish kind of looks like a fish. Kind of, but then you see how it develops. People try to write it down. Here's how it gets written down. Cuneiform, a bird. All right. Chinese kind of looks like a bird. But then that's how it gets written down. So that's how this picture of a bird gets transformed into the character. The same thing with other things: an axe, arrow, a pot. I got you. Let's see what my next thing is. Yeah, I'll do Mesoamerica and then we'll finish. I have only a little bit more to do after this, so I'll finish with Mesoamerica before we go. Mesoamerica, the last one, is Middle America. You know that Meso means middle, so the middle of America, which is Mexico, Guatemala, that Central America, those places, especially southern Mexico and Guatemala. Sometime in the 600s BC, we have evidence of what appears to be a writing system amongst the Zapotec civilization, the Zapotec people in central Mexico. It appears to be a writing system. It's not totally clear. This is an example of it. It seems to be acting like a writing system and not just pictures. So maybe it's a proto-writing system. Maybe it's an intermediate stage to a full-blown writing system. And we can't read any of it. Okay, so we don't know, we can't tell if it is actually a writing system. We don't know what some of the stuff means. But it seems to indicate information rather than just what a picture would be communicating. And the Zapotec people are still around. And there they are, two little. I think there's a picture from the Jehovah's Witness congregation down in Mexico. Two little Jehovah's Witnesses. Maybe they'll come knocking at my door someday. Señor, somos testigos de Jehová or Jehová. Come on in, muchachos. So there they are. So the Zapotec are still around. They're not dead. There they are. Okay? But a true writing system, because we can interpret it and we know it's clearly a writing system, does not develop, at least provably develop, until the 200s BC amongst the Maya, who are in southern Mexico and in Guatemala. And it's the only Native American writing system to have been deciphered, which took decades. And we still don't fully understand it. It's a logogrammic system. So it's syllabic, so it uses pictures to show syllables of the language, and it's very complex and elaborate. How you take these little pictures, they change as you combine them together into different forms, stuff like that. So here would be an example of Maya, and you can see the glyphs transcribed for you into the Roman alphabet with how they would be pronounced in the translation. And you read it from top to bottom. And they're glyphs because they're not really written down in books. I mean, that seemed to have come later when the Spanish got there and they brought writing in books. These are carvings on rocks and stone of these pictures. And so you read from the top to the bottom and left to right. So you're reading from the top, Yakawa, these three pictures of each of these syllables, ya, ka, and wa, that are combined. This is a number 4, that are combined together to form this one picture, which then makes the word. Yakao. Yakao. All right? And as you go down, down, down. And And so you can then read it. You go down, now we can read it. Because scholars could kind of take apart the different symbols of the syllables. They could start figuring out, oh, this picture refers to this syllable, and that's how it looks when it's paired with this other one, because it changes. And now we can start reading it, and because they knew Maya, because there's still Mayans around, and there's still some people who speak Maya, actually a lot of people, they can then figure out what the writing was saying and translate it. But it took a long, long time and a lot of piecing together of all these different pictures. Because again, it's a picture-based system, so they need a picture for every kind of concept. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's a picture-based system, but the pictures change when they're combined together in syllabic form to make words. Okay, I've got a little bit more, but I'll save that for Thursday. God bless you all. I will see you then. You too, sir. Have a good day. Have a good day, sir. Thank you.